All right, grade 5. So this week we look at Unit 5, Natural Vegetation. If you want to pause the video quickly and grab your textbook, you need to be looking at page number 78. Now, when we look at natural vegetation, there's a few important words that we have to remember. All right, so I want you to remember the word indigenous plant, all right, or specifically the word indigenous. Remember that indigenous means belonging to a certain place or naturally coming from a certain place. So, for example, we say that the protea is indigenous to Southern Africa because the protea is only found in South Africa, and it is also our national flower and the emblem for our national cricket team. So what natural vegetation would be, this would be indigenous plants that grow in an area. And we're going to look exactly at what types of areas we get and how to identify them. So on the top of page 78, what is natural vegetation? It says indigenous plants are plants that which grow naturally in an area, an indigenous plant from the natural vegetation of an area. So that is what natural vegetation is. Okay, and I'm going to explain it all as we go through the slide. It says natural vegetation and climate. So these two things affect one another. So the climate will depend on what type of vegetation we're going to get inside an area. Right, but in the textbook it says here that the type of natural vegetation that grows in the region depends on the temperature, the amount of rain, and the time of year in which the rain falls. So we've looked at how to read weather and temperature, rainfall, etc. We're looking at it over a span of a long time because we're looking at the climate. Right, so remember, weather was over a day or a week, whereas climate is over a whole season or a year. And then there on page number 78 still it says, for example, forests will grow naturally where there's over 800 millimeters of rain a year. The rain falls all throughout the year. Look at the photographs below. So don't worry about the photographs below because I have a few nice ones here on the slides in order for you to identify the different types of areas that we get. Okay, so here we can see there, if we look at Africa as a whole, in the middle of Africa here it's very green, and this is because it's very close to the equator. Now, countries close to the equator don't necessarily experience a winter and a summer. The temperature stays constant throughout the year and they get a lot of rain. So here we can see that this mostly forests are going to grow. Then you also have the tropics, and we'll talk about that as well as we go through when we look at savanna grasslands and so on. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, looking at the rainforest. As I said, along the equator there's very high temperatures and tons of rain, so that means that there's a lot of rain. And then we can see that we have complex ecosystems, plants living on top of plants, many levels, as well as a canopy at the top. So what they're referring to, the canopy, these are, if you look at the trees, right at the top, and over here this would be referred to as a canopy. It's usually where monkeys sit and they stay there for safety, because on the ground this could be hunted by animals or snakes, etc. Okay, so the first one to identify is a rainforest. How do we identify a rainforest? There's a lot of trees, very green, and lots of rain. Okay, the next type that we would get is the savanna grasslands. This is something that we're all familiar with in South Africa because this is what our area looks like, and this is the region that we're in, and our climate gives us this type of region. So it says that there's large open areas of grassland with few trees and bush. So you can see there's lots of grass and animals grazing and very few trees. It says the largest areas of South Africa are Sahara. Okay, and then it says warm temperatures and rainfall in the summer. So pretty much exactly what we experience here. We have warm temperatures, mostly warm temperatures throughout the year, and we get our rainfall in the summer months. Okay, here's a few examples of what you find in savanna grasslands. You're going to get mostly baobab trees, large game, so our big five, antelope, buck, etc. Okay, the next one and the last one that we're going to look at is the deserts. All right, so with the deserts, how you identify a desert is it's going to be very sandy or rocky. Okay, here we can see that the north and south of the equator. It says the Sahara in the north and Namib Kalahari in the south, and these two we learnt about when we were learning about the Khoi and the San. It says it's incredibly hot and dry and contains mountains. Right, so these are the three main ones that you need to be able to identify, grade 5s. Just to quickly recap and summarize, because it's just a short video before you read through the case study. But I want you to remember what the word indigenous means. All right, so it's saying that something comes from a specific place. Natural vegetation would be indigenous vegetation because it's plants that grow naturally in an area. The plants that grow in an area will be determined by the climate. Remember, climate being over a long period of time, and then you have to say whether it's going to be a climate where there's lots of rain. If there's a climate where there's lots of rain, you're going to have a forest, right? Is it a climate where it's seasonal rain and very warm? Then you're going to have a savanna grassland. And if it's a climate where it's very hot and dry with very little rain, you're going to then have a desert. Okay, so grade 5s, there's no formal activity for this week for geography. However, I do want you to read through the case study on page number 79 and 80, and just to familiarize yourself with the types of vegetation that you get in the specific areas. Okay, so if I had to ask you, where would you most likely find a cactus? That would be in a desert area. Where would you find a baobab tree? That would be a savanna grassland. And now to identify it as well as explain that type of area and what vegetation grows there. Okay, you're not going to be doing the summary and assessment. That's only going to take place next week to test your memory and see what you maybe need to work on, all right, and ask questions about. But for this week for geography, this is the only thing that you're going to focus on. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask me.